What if the most important force in Britain's history was not a person or a law, but a river? Not something built or decided, but something that simply existed, and in doing so shaped everything around it. Because to understand Britain, it helps to begin with the Thames. Welcome to the making of Britain. Long before London existed, before there were streets, buildings or institutions, there was the river. The River Thames flowed through a landscape that was still forming, shaped by the retreat of glaciers and the gradual settling of land. It was not yet a centre of power or trade. It was simply a river, tidal, navigable and connected to the sea. And those characteristics would become decisive. The Thames was not the largest river in Britain, nor the fastest, nor the most dramatic, but it occupied a position that made it uniquely useful. It connected inland areas to the North Sea, offering a route that could be followed, used, and eventually depended upon. Early communities were drawn to rivers for practical reasons. Water provided food, transport, and a reliable reference point in the landscape. Along the Thames, small settlements began to emerge, taking advantage of these conditions. The river could be crossed in certain places, creating natural points of contact and exchange. These crossing points mattered. They shaped where people gathered, where routes converged, and where future development would take place. The Thames was not directing these choices in any conscious sense, but it was shaping the possibilities within which they were made. The transformation of the Thames into something more than a local resource begins with the Romans. When they arrived in Britain in the 1st century AD, they recognised the strategic value of the river. At a point where it could be bridged and where it remained navigable to the sea, they established the settlement of Londinium. This was not inevitable. It was a decision based on geography, logistics and control. The river allowed goods to move in and out, supported communication and provided a defensible position. Londinium grew quickly, becoming the centre of administration and trade. The Thames in this context became an asset, something to be used, organised and integrated into a wider system. As you're still walking with me, can I ask you to drop me a like? It helps more than you imagine. Thanks. When Roman rule ended, Londinium declined, but the river remained. This is an important point. Political structures can disappear, institutions can collapse, but geography persists. The Thames continued to flow, continuing to offer the same possibilities it always had. Over time, settlements returned and the area began to grow again. The river provided continuity in a period of change. It followed the re-emergence of trade and communication, even as the wider political landscape shifted. The foundations laid earlier were not entirely lost. They were still there, embedded in the geography. At this point, it's worth considering how much of London's eventual importance was shaped by this river. If the Thames had flowed differently, if it had been less navigable, less accessible, or located elsewhere, would the same city have emerged? Or would power have centred somewhere else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this question sits at the centre of how we understand geography and history. As London developed through the medieval period, the Thames became increasingly central to its economy. Goods moved along the river, timber, wood, food, and later more complex products. The river functioned as a highway, long before roads could serve the same purpose effectively. Wharves and docks developed along its banks, creating a landscape shaped by trade. The river was not just a route, it was a place of activity, of exchange, of work. Its tidal nature allowed ships to move in and out, connecting London to other parts of Britain and to the wider world. This connection would become one of the defining features of the city. By the early modern period, the Thames was no longer simply a national resource. It had become part of a global network. As Britain overseas trade expanded, London emerged as a central hub, and the river played a crucial role in that process. Ships carried goods, people and resources moved along the Thames, linking the city to distant regions. The river became a point of arrival and departure, a place where global connections were made tangible. The growth of the British Empire was not caused by the Thames alone, but the river enabled and supported it. It provided the infrastructure through which trade could operate at scale. By the way, if you subscribe, there's a whole back catalogue of videos similar to this for you to enjoy. The Industrial Revolution brought a further change. The volume of goods moving through London increased and the river adapted to meet new demands. Docks expanded, infrastructure developed, and the landscape along the Thames became increasingly industrialised. This was not without consequence. Pollution increased, congestion became an issue, and the relationship between the city and the river grew more complex. The Thames was still essential, but it was also under pressure. The same qualities that made it valuable, accessibility, connectivity and capacity, also made it vulnerable to overuse. From a modern perspective, the intensive use of the Thames during this period might raise concerns. Environmental impact, overcrowding, and the strain on resources are all visible in hindsight. But at the time, these developments made sense. The river was the most efficient way to move goods, to support trade and to sustain a growing city. The decisions made were shaped by immediate needs and available options. There were few alternatives that could match the scale and efficiency of river transport. The Thames was used because it worked. Today, the Thames remains central to London, but its role has changed. It's still used for transport and trade, but also for leisure, tourism, and environmental management. Efforts have been made to clean and protect the river, reflecting the shift in how it's understood. It's no longer seen only as a resource to be used, but as an environment to be maintained. And yet its historical role remains visible. The layout of the city, the location of key sites, the patterns of movement, all reflect the influence of the river. The Thames continues to shape London, even as the nature of that influence evolves. If the Thames helped shape London, and London helped shape Britain, what does that suggest about the role of rivers more broadly? Are they simply features of the landscape, or are they active participants in history? And if one river could have such an impact, what about the others that flow across Britain? YouTube has chosen this video especially for you because you've watched this. Watch it next, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. If you ding the bell, you'll be notified when episodes are published, so you don't miss any. Thanks for walking a little further down the road that built Britain with me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.